I matched with this gorgeous redhead on Tinder who seemed perfect, until I realized she was actually my ex-wife's divorce lawyer. But when he got drunk and started sending me voice messages at 2 a.m., what he revealed about their professional relationship made my blood run cold. My name is Cameron Fletcher. I'm 41, a software developer in Portland, and 6 months ago my divorce from Miranda was finalized. The settlement was brutal. I'd lost the house, half my savings, and paid substantial alimony. Miranda's lawyer, Richard Blackwell, had been relentless during the 18-month process, maximizing her settlement by portraying me as a neglectful workaholic. Richard was everything I wasn't. Tall, confident, silver-haired with commanding presence. During depositions, he'd dissect my answers with surgical precision. Helena Morrison, my attorney, had warned me about his reputation for targeting tech professionals with aggressive tactics. After the divorce, I moved to a modest downtown apartment trying to rebuild. Work kept me busy, but evenings were lonely. Friends suggested dating apps after months of resistance. I downloaded Tinder on a quiet Sunday in March. The first weeks were disappointing. Awkward conversations, canceled dates. I was ready to delete the app when Scarlett's profile appeared. Her photos were stunning. Red hair, bright green eyes, genuine smile. Her bio read, freelance photographer, loves hiking, terrible at cooking, looking for real conversation. We matched immediately. Her first message caught me off guard. Your profile says you build software that helps people. What kind of people? I explained my accessibility work for disabled users. Instead of polite deflection, she asked thoughtful follow-ups, sharing stories about photographing adaptive sports events. Our conversations flowed naturally. She was intelligent, funny, genuine. We texted constantly, sharing random thoughts and photos. After a week, I suggested coffee. She agreed but needed a few days to finish a photography project. As conversations deepened, she asked about my divorce. I shared the loneliness, how work had become an escape. She shared her own history, a failed engagement, dating challenges as an independent woman in her late 30s. 2 weeks in, something changed. Her responses came at odd hours. When questioned about her schedule, she explained freelance photography meant irregular hours. She began asking specific questions about my divorce settlement, property division, financial obligations. She framed these as getting to know me better. I shared details I'd only discussed with Helena, tight alimony payments, split retirement funds, the house Miranda had kept. Scarlett seemed genuinely sympathetic, sharing similar friend stories while asking insightful questions. After 3 weeks of constant communication, we finally scheduled our coffee date. She suggested a trendy cafe in the Pearl District near my office. I arrived early, nervous but excited to finally meet this woman who'd become such an important part of my daily routine. I waited for an hour. She never showed. Her text came as I was leaving. Emergency family situation, so sorry, we'll explain everything soon. I was disappointed but understanding. Life happens, emergencies arise. I texted back, offering support and asking if she needed anything. But her response was strange. Instead of explaining the emergency, she asked if we could postpone meeting until after her current project was completed. She'd be unavailable for calls or video chats until then, but we could continue texting. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to reverse search her photos on Google. I'd never done this before, but something about her sudden unavailability nagged at me. The results were shocking. Her photos belonged to a professional model named Jessica Chen, whose Instagram account had been public until recently. Every photo Scarlett had sent me was stolen from Jessica's portfolio. I stared at my phone screen, trying to process what this meant. The woman I'd been falling for didn't exist. Someone had been catfishing me for 3 weeks using stolen photos and fabricated stories. But who would do this? And why? If this mystery is getting your attention, hit subscribe, because the truth was about to get much worse. I spent the next day researching catfishing patterns, trying to understand the motivation behind elaborate deceptions. Most cases involved financial scams or emotional manipulation by lonely individuals seeking connection. But this felt different. Scarlett hadn't asked for money or gifts. She hadn't pushed for personal information that could be used for identity theft. Her questions had focused specifically on my divorce and financial situation. That evening, I decided to confront her directly. I texted, "I know the photos aren't real. Who are you really?" The response came immediately. "I can explain everything. Please don't block me." Then nothing for hours. I was about to delete her number when my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Scarlett's number. Not a text, but an actual voice call. I answered, expecting to hear a woman's voice trying to explain her deception. Instead, I heard a man's voice, slurred with alcohol. "Cameron! Cameron Fletcher?" My blood went cold. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. "Who is this?" I asked. There was a pause, then mumbled cursing. "Shit. Wrong number. Thought I was calling." The line went dead. I sat in my apartment, heart pounding. Someone knew my full name, had my phone number, and was calling from Scarlett's account. This wasn't random catfishing. This was targeted. I called back immediately. The phone rang once, then went to voicemail. A generic automated message, no personal greeting. Over the next hour, I received 3 more accidental calls from the same number. Each time, I heard background noise before the line disconnected. Conversations between 2 people, but I couldn't make out the words. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a voice message. I listened with growing horror as the pieces finally came together. The voice was Richard Blackwell, my ex-wife's divorce attorney, and he was completely drunk. "Miranda, babe, I think Fletcher's getting suspicious about the Scarlett thing." My hands shook as the message continued. "Maybe we should stop. This is getting complicated. What if he figures out it was me messaging him?" Then Miranda's voice, clearer in the background. "Richard, you're drunk. Stop recording voice messages." "But what if he reports this to the bar association? I could lose my license." "He won't find out it was you. Just delete the dating profile tomorrow and block his number." The recording cut off. I played it 3 more times, each replay making the situation more horrifying. My ex-wife and her divorce attorney had been running an elaborate catfishing scheme, using me for entertainment or information gathering. But there was something else in Richard's drunken rambling, a familiarity between him and Miranda that went beyond attorney-client privilege, the way he called her babe, the casual intimacy in their conversation. They weren't just conspiring against me. They were involved romantically. I spent the rest of the night piecing together the timeline. Richard and Miranda's relationship had likely begun during our divorce proceedings. While he was professionally representing her interests, he was personally involved with her. This revelation recontextualized everything about my divorce. The aggressive tactics, the excessive settlement demands, the character assassination during depositions. Richard hadn't just been doing his job, he'd been personally motivated to destroy me. The next morning, I called Helena Morrison and asked for an emergency meeting. I needed to understand if what I'd discovered had legal implications. Helena reviewed the voice message recording with growing amazement. As a family law attorney, she immediately grasped the severity of Richard's ethical violations. "This is potentially grounds for legal malpractice," she explained. "An attorney having a romantic relationship with a client during active representation creates massive conflicts of interest." She outlined the implications. If Richard and Miranda's relationship had begun during our divorce, every decision he'd made could be questioned. His aggressive tactics might have been motivated by personal rather than professional interests. "The catfishing scheme adds another layer," Helena continued. "Using deceptive means to gather information from an opposing party could be considered fraudulent behavior. But pursuing this would require proof beyond a single voice message. We'd need to document the pattern of deception and establish when their relationship had actually begun. Helena suggested hiring Mason Cross, a private investigator who specialized in attorney misconduct cases. If Richard and Miranda had been involved during our divorce, there would be evidence. Mason's investigation took 2 weeks. His report was more comprehensive than I'd expected, revealing a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond my case. Richard Blackwell had a history of becoming romantically involved with female clients during their divorce proceedings. Over the past 5 years, he'd had relationships with at least 4 women he'd represented. Always beginning during active cases, the Oregon State Bar had received complaints about Richard before, but none had been substantiated with sufficient evidence. His clients either refused to cooperate with investigations or claimed their relationships had begun after legal representation ended. Mason had found financial records showing dinners, hotel stays, and travel expenses that suggested Richard and Miranda's relationship had begun at least 6 months before our divorce was finalized. He'd also discovered that the catfishing scheme wasn't their first attempt to gather information about me. They'd created fake social media profiles to monitor my activities, had someone call my employer asking about my salary, and had even attempted to friend my colleagues on LinkedIn. Armed with this evidence, Helena filed a complaint with the Oregon State Bar Association and requested a formal investigation into Richard's conduct. We also prepared a motion to reopen my divorce case based on attorney misconduct. But Richard wasn't going down quietly. 2 days after Helena filed our complaints, I received a call from Gregory Stone, Richard's law partner. He wanted to discuss a settlement that would benefit everyone involved. The meeting was set for their downtown office. I arrived with Helena. Unsure what to expect, Richard sat at the head of a polished conference table, looking haggard and defensive. Gregory did most of the talking, painting Richard's actions as poor judgment rather than deliberate misconduct. The catfishing had been Miranda's idea, something Richard had reluctantly participated in while intoxicated. They offered a financial settlement, return of $75,000 from my divorce settlement, plus agreement to reduce my ongoing alimony obligations. In exchange, I would withdraw all complaints and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Helena advised against accepting immediately. We requested time to consider their offer and evaluate its adequacy, given the scope of misconduct we'd uncovered. That evening, as I walked to my apartment, I noticed a familiar figure sitting in the lobby. Miranda was waiting for me, looking anxious and desperate. She approached cautiously, as if expecting me to call security. Her first words surprised me. "I'm sorry, Cameron, this got way out of hand." We talked for nearly an hour. Miranda explained how her relationship with Richard had begun during our divorce, initially as emotional support that gradually became romantic. She insisted it hadn't influenced her legal decisions, but admitted the timeline was problematic. The catfishing scheme had been her idea, born from curiosity about my post-divorce life and jealousy about my apparent ability to move forward. Richard had created the fake profile during a night of heavy drinking, intending it as a temporary joke. But as our conversations had continued, Miranda became obsessed with gathering information. She convinced Richard to maintain the deception, using what she learned to feel superior about her own choices. "I realized how pathetic it was," she admitted, "watching you try to connect with someone who didn't exist, seeing how lonely you were." I wanted Richard to stop, but he said we were in too deep. She offered to testify about the timeline of their relationship and Richard's ethical violations if it would help my case. Her cooperation would strengthen our position significantly. 3 weeks later, Richard agreed to a comprehensive settlement rather than face career-ending disciplinary hearings. He returned $125,000 from my divorce settlement, eliminated my alimony obligations entirely, and paid additional damages. The Oregon State Bar suspended his license for 18 months. Blackwell and Associates dissolved. Miranda and I reached a better understanding. She acknowledged their deception had been cruel and unnecessary. 6 months later, I was in a surprisingly good financial position. The returned money allowed me to buy a house. Without alimony obligations, I could build savings again. I'd learned important lessons about online dating and trusting instincts. When something seems too perfect, it probably is. I eventually met Sarah, a graphic designer who was refreshingly straightforward. We've been dating 3 months. The most satisfying outcome was learning my experience helped other victims of Richard's misconduct. 2 former clients came forward after news of his suspension became public. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best outcomes. Richard and Miranda thought they were playing a clever game at my expense. Instead, they handed me evidence to expose years of unethical behavior and recover substantial losses. The fake redhead on Tinder seemed too good to be true because she was. But discovering that deception led to justice, financial recovery, and eventually a real relationship built on honesty rather than manipulation.